Hello everyone, and welcome back to the A10-CII tutorial series, where today we have finished with the weapon employment, so now we're going to be looking at some of the more general basics that are often part of the early parts of most tutorial series. The idea is that now at this point you should be able to hop into a quick mission, do a task there, have a lot of fun there, but now let's get you sorted so you know how to do any sort of campaign missions or any multiplayer missions that require you to do startups, takeoff, taxi, navigation, and so on. So here we are, we've just spawned in. This is the Persian Gulf Map's Cold Start mission that I've hopped into, but the procedure is exactly the same no matter where you're starting. And the first thing you probably want to do is ask the ground crew to rearm before you do the startup, and I'll point out exactly why we do that as we go on. And so let's just quickly do that here. So normal armament as with any other module, let's just say that I felt like taking a 2,000-pound laser-guided bomb here.
Request rearming.
Just to make that change at this point, so that it will be done and ready for when we're starting up. Now we'll be going through this the way that I tend to. Other people have different procedures for doing this, and it's really just a case of finding one that works for you. Main thing with the A10-CII is ideally you want to get the power on and power to your CDU and IGI down here as soon as possible, because that takes a long time to start up and that is time that it is just ticking away. So you want that on as soon as possible. You can do everything else as it goes. So anyway, let's get started. So the first thing you need to do is go down to the right hand side here and turn on your battery power. Right click the battery power switch there. So that it's on for the future, we can put the inverter onto standby. And again, for the future, let's put the APU power generator on. It's now time to turn on APU power. So if we look over here, just behind the throttle, we've got our APU start. Put that into the up position. At this point, the APU is going to be running. What I'll also do at this point depends on the mission, but I like to turn on my radios now while the APU is starting, so flowing from right all the way to left. And so that's just a case of putting these into the transmit receive mode and turning the frequency dials onto which frequencies that you want to use, unless you've got easy communication on, in which case you just need them on. Do the same here for the VHF radio. And for the UHF radio, you just want to turn that on to main. Again, set up these frequencies as to what you need for the mission. At this point, the APU should have stabilized, and so now you can start the left engine. To do that, you have to move this out of its detent into the idle position. The default keybind for this, I believe, is Right Alt and Home, and you can bind it to anything else. If you've got an idle detent in your throttle, you can bind it, and that's what I do here. So with that bound, I then move around the clock bit slightly more, again moving from the station that I've just activated. We can left click these three switches, they activate the SAS systems, and also push and hold the trim takeoff for about a second. Then move to the front here, check that your anti-skid switch is on. Landing lights into the position you want, so I'll put these into taxi mode. Then swinging over to the right hand side here, we can click this to close the canopy so we're not deafened by the noise of the engine starting. Once your dials have all stabilized, you can now start the right engine, so again turning to this side. Default key is right shift and home. Move that up into the idle position and your second engine will start to come on. At this point, the first engine's providing enough ground power so it can turn right over to the right hand side here and turn on the CDU and the IGI in order to get them starting to power up and starting to align. Once you've done those, you can really take your time, because this is going to be the limiting factor on getting the aircraft up and started. While I'm over on this side, I also turn on the pitot heat. Probably don't really need it here in the Persian Gulf, but certainly in the Caucasus you do. If you like, you can also set up your ILS and TACAN frequencies. And importantly, if you are running the A10-CII, you can turn on the the helmet display here by right-clicking to move this switch into the on position. You can check it's working. If you look outside, you'll see the display. Then turning back to the central consoles, we can get this starting to turn on. So moving from the right here, we uncage the backup ADI, right-click each of these bottom switches once to turn on KQ, JTRS, and turn IFC into its test position. And then on the HUD we'll get this message, engage pre-flight test. We just push enter, and that will run through the pre-flight test. Can then turn on our two MFCDs just by right-clicking on the power knob twice to set them to day. Obviously, if you're at night, leave them in the night position. And at this point, your second engine should have come fully on, so you don't need your APU anymore. So we can turn the APU off, turn back over to the right, and we can turn APU power off. While we're looking down in this corner, we can also turn on our countermeasures system here by clicking on each of these switches once and turning this dial into the manual or man mode position. Up at the front here we see that our pre-flight testing is complete, so we can push enter to complete. Go to the select rocker here, go down all the way to exit. Exit out of there by pushing enter, and then if you right click on the IFC test, you get the regular HUD display. Now down here, both of our displays are showing the DTS upload, so this is our data cartridge. You just want to acknowledge the message and then click load all. When you do, all of the asterisks next to all of these will disappear, and as it loads each of these in turn, we will get a new asterisk by them. Now the reason why I said to get the weapon sorted beforehand is that when the ground crew load the weapon, they update the weapon DSMS data cartridge, and so as long as your weapons are unchanged at this point, everything works. If you do have to make a change to your weapon, say you already started hot and you've changed your weapon, or you've suddenly realized you've made a mistake, you always need to go back to this load screen and do load DSMS again in order to update that for your new weapon setup. Now at this point we can really take our time, and we can see exactly why we can take our time if we go to the CDU repeater page here. This is just a repeat of what we've got down here. You just need to look down a bit less. And here we've got T is equal to some numbers. That will slowly start counting up. This is your alignment progress. We need to wait until this reads 4008. At that point, this will flash and everything will be set. Till then, you shouldn't really move. You can start taking off earlier and align in flight. Better practice just to let this align on the ground. You've got plenty of other things to be getting on with. Notably, there's a couple of things that I like to do. One is to sort out my helmet-mounted display settings. To do that, we go to the status page, go to HMCS at the top, and here we've got all the various features that can be displayed on the head-mounted display and the mode that they are currently displayed in. Notably, I like changing some of these onto always on instead of occluded mode. So if we look at this now, if I'm looking out of the side, I get everything being displayed. If I look down into the cockpit or I look forward at the HUD, it disappears. There are some things I like to keep on, and so to do that we select next to them, and then we press this occlude button. That'll cycle it to off, cycle it again to always on. Now we can see no matter where I'm looking, the crosshair which marks the point at which my head-mounted display sensor is pointing at is always on. Equally, I like doing that with my own SPI. Like doing that with the HDC. This is what you use to select your position when you're marking things using the helmet. And I also like having the TGP diamond always on. That way I can see where the TGP is looking at all times, even if I'm pointing at a target that's occluded by the HUD. Otherwise, once that's done, we can just go to any other page here. So we'll just go back to the CDU page. This is in fact finished at this point, but I'll just talk you through the remaining parts of the setup just so you can be 100% sure that you're ready to go. So a useful thing to do at this point is to go to your DSMS page and set up all of your weapon profiles. We've been going through these individually per weapon as we've been doing the other modules, and this is really when you want to be doing all of that setup. This is when you want to set whether you want it in CCIP or CCRP mode. This is where you want to set things like the laser time, auto laser on and off. Get everything set up here when you're on the ground. You really don't want to be doing this when you're en route to the target. Equally, we can go to the tactical awareness display and set this up. Notably, I like changing this into the MGRS mode so that our coordinates here will match the coordinates you get by JTAC 9 lines. And we can also set up things for doing multiplayer flights here. If we go to net, you've got your own ID and your group ID. If you have the same group ID as another person, you will appear on their various displays as being a wingman, and you can set your own ID in order to differentiate between different planes in that flight. So generally, wing leader will be own ID 1, and we set these just using the upfront controller. So for example, let's say I want to be in group 2, I'll type 02, push the button there, and let's say I want to be number 2 in the flight, can put that in. I'll show it to anyone else in group 2, and they will get this little 2 whenever they're looking at me. Otherwise, you might want to set up other waypoints at this point. You can do that through the nav interface. I'll be dedicating a whole other tutorial on entering waypoints into this. It is not as scary as it seems, and once you get the hang of it, can be a really invaluable tool. But for now, let's just say that we're ready. And we can see here that we get the confirmation INS nav ready. When we get that, we can go over here to the nav mode, go down here, and we want to be flying with the EGI. Now it's selected. Really, you want to treat your HARS as a backup system. The EGI is the much better one to be using for navigation. At this point, we can always look down here to see what we've missed. This is a lovely little panel just telling you everything that you may have missed. It's your general error panel, but here you want all these lights out. So see here, I've not armed my ejection seat. So over here, this ejection seat control goes down. And the final one is EAC, something that I do often forget. You do need to wait until the Iggy is aligned before turning this on. But that is found just over here. And so we just put that into the up position. And now we're all set. We've got no errors here. Everything is ready. One final thing before taxiing is you should push the nose wheel steer button just to turn that on. But we'll cover that again in how to taxi. So there we go, we have cold started the A10, we are ready to go at this point, everything is set up, and really it's just a case of finding a pattern that works for you. For me, this way of doing it, basically turn on a major source of power, either APU left or right engine, then do one particular pass doing a number of things. That just works for me. I find breaking it into those smaller sections is very useful. But the lovely thing I find about the A10-CII is just this panel here, so that when you're learning, it's very easy to make a mistake, forget something. You can just look down here. Anything major that you've forgotten, you'll see popping up. That's all for today. If you have any questions, do just let me know down in the comments. Otherwise, I hope to catch you in the next video. Until then, be kind to yourself and everyone else. Cheers.